And then there's this other part of us that wants to fit in, that wants to feel safe. And so our voice reflects what we believe about ourselves and about the world. Welcome, everyone. It's so great to be with you today. This podcast and the few that come after this are going to be all about why it's important you know how to speak and why you speaking up more in your life at the dinner table, at work, standing up for yourself more, why all these things really count and how it's going to take you to the next level of your life. So, this is yes for the woman, the leader, the entrepreneur, the person who is ready to get on stage and speak more with a mic in their hand. This is for that vendor or craftsperson who wants to start speaking up more about their products. This is also for the householder who wants to start communicating more openly and lovingly and truthfully with their significant other or with their kids, with their friends, and start asking for what really would nourish their soul and saying no to what doesn't. So if that sounds like one of you, then stick around for today's episode. You're going to love it. I want to take you back to my former marriage because in that story lies the key to why I am speaking about this so much in my business and why I really want to bring you into a different relationship with your voice. We're not just using our mouth and making sounds. We are speaking from our soul, our particular voice, the way we want to speak, but also the way we sound is an audible extension of who we are. And so many times in my life, but also in so many people's lives that I speak to, there's always been some moment, whether that's when we're kids or even as we're growing up and into our adulthood, where someone or something told us to be quiet, literally, or the moment it was not safe for us to speak. And it was such a negative experience that it sticks with us. And that becomes a part of our paradigm. It becomes a part of our identity that, look, it's not safe for you to speak about these things. So annex your voice, orphan your voice, change it. And this is where we even develop new personas with our voice. Your voice will change depending on how relaxed you are. Your voice will change. It will sound different if you come back from a vacation. Your voice will change. You'll sound different when you fall in love. Your voice sounds different when you do deep meditation consistently and become more in touch with your inner self. One of my former colleagues, she told me that happened to her. She went away on a deep yoga ashram retreat in New Zealand. And I think she was gone for maybe like 6 months. She came back and she was having lunch with a friend. And the friend said something funny and she laughed. And the friend was like, whose laugh is that? And she was like, I know. I don't even recognize it myself, but this is really how I laugh. And it was like a deeper, full belly laugh. So we all have these moments where we sort of hear ourselves and we're like, who's that? And then there's this other part of us that wants to fit in, that wants to feel safe. And so our voice reflects what we believe about ourselves and about the world. So in the past, I was married for 9 years and I married to a very intellectual man, which is one of the qualities I found attractive about him. I love thinking and I love myself being deeply inspired by someone else who's thought a lot about a topic or who has dove deep into his own mind. And so my ex not only had one, but 2 master's degrees. And he had it in really interesting studies too. So education was really important to him. And one of the reasons that was so was because it was for his parents. And I heard so many times, how much my former mother-in-law was the valedictorian of her high school class. And she was an English major. And that's an important detail because my ex growing up, part of his love, I guess, that he got from his mother was studying the English language and consequently getting corrected a lot so that there was a really deep understanding of the English language, grammar, past participles, all those things that most normal people don't learn, or that they, if you don't go on and get an English major, you just don't study grammar like that. And it is a great thing to learn. But how you come about learning those things makes a difference. Because when I was then married to him, being corrected became a part of my everyday life. If I said something wrong, like telling our dog to lay down, he'd always be like, lie down. It's lie down, right? Little things like that. And do I want to know how to properly say something? Sure. Like that's great. But when it consistently comes at you, you start to realize how much you don't know. And you start to realize, or at least I did in my case, how poor my grammar was. And that makes you second guess yourself. And it's not just I'm second guessing like my basketball skills or my ability to bake a cake, it was my voice. And then I began to get all in my head so that before I even began to speak to someone or reply to a question or just have a basic, easygoing conversation, I was immediately uptight. My nervous system began to hate speaking because of the negative reinforcement. The negative reinforcement was that I was a terrible speaker and that I didn't know what I was talking about. And that my husband at the time probably was like really fed up, probably found it unattractive that I couldn't like remember all these grammatical proper ways of speaking. And it took what could have been a very natural conversation and it put it on like a spelling bee competition level, a collegiate level, where it's like giving my keynote or defending my thesis. That's what our conversations ended up feeling like. And that became my norm. And it became a competition. And even people would be like, ooh, at the dining room table of like when a big word was used. It pedestaled the English language. It also pedestaled logic. And here I was married so young, 23, and fresh out of yoga school, already practicing it for 7 years. And then getting my yoga teacher certification, I started to teach more. And I wanted to open up a studio at some point. So there's two things that were parallel that were happening that are really important for the trajectory of my life, really. And how I've come to find my authentic voice and how I want you to think about finding your authentic voice and start to think about parallels in your life where maybe you've started to feel uncomfortable and take on another persona or someone else's voice. So in my home life, in my marriage, getting corrected a lot, hanging out with other intellectuals, feeling very less than because I just have my associate's degree and barely got that. And everyone has masters and PhDs and all these things. And opening up a yoga studio, which was like the antithesis of my family that I married into. So much so where anytime I brought up anything about mantra or energy or chakras or feeling or relax, it was met with like skepticism and eyebrows going up. So I had to shut down my business in terms of energy and conversation when it came to being with my ex's family. It just wasn't welcomed. And that's a very hard divide if you think about it. To be one person over here and to go and make a living being some other person over here. Then on top of that, in the yoga studio world, I actually was adopting the voice of my teacher at the time. I wouldn't do it in between classes, but whenever I went to speak, I noticed that I would turn on her voice and I would sound like her. The reason I did that, it's clear to me now. 2 reasons. One, because I adored her. I absolutely loved my teacher at that time. She's no longer my teacher. I don't consider her my teacher. There's been a falling out there for various reasons, but I wanted to be her with the most respect. I wanted to be a good student and be traditional, right? Student follows guru. And I wanted to adopt that sort of traditional Indian spiritual path. So sounding like her meant I was the closest proximity to her energy. The other reason I wanted to do it was because she was successful. She had opened up a studio. She ran it. It was doing very well. There's multiple locations. Classes were packed, wait lists. So I thought, okay, well, sounding like her must be the way you teach. So that was the yogic reason why. But then the other reason was because of my home life. I was constantly being corrected. So my voice, the way I wanted to speak, and the words I were using were wrong. So therefore, it became very easy for me to just talk like my yoga teacher and not be Kim Fisher because none of that was safe. It wasn't the way to be lucrative. My natural voice wasn't the way to be liked or approved. My normal voice, my natural voice, and the way I wanted to speak in the language and my delivery and the words and my level of education or whatever you want to call that wasn't loved either. There just wasn't space for it. So my result, my solution was to become someone else, to bury my love for energy yogic world, which is like crazy, right? Because I had the studio. I could be my freest self while at the studio, but then I had to go home and be someone else entirely. Now, that's not all bad because it did lead me on this path of going back to school. My ex-husband, I will say, inspired me, believed in me to go back. He's like, you're a very smart person and you can unearth that even more if you went back and got some higher degrees. So I did, but that meant selling the studio. However, the beautiful thing that occurred there was that by going back to school and being around professors and other students like me who were curious and exploring, and being that student gave me the automatic permission to be wrong sometimes, to say it wrong, to pronounce it wrong, and to be lovingly corrected by my professors. Not only was that happening, and it helped me to find and feel my way safely into beginner mind again and learning, what I discovered was that I wasn't being corrected a lot. I thought I would be a lot more corrected in school. So here I was around all of these professors, PhDs, brilliant people, learning very difficult topics in psychology, cognitive science, computer science, and then human-computer interaction. I mean, top-notch nerd stuff, not to mention neuroscience, and I was a research assistant. Anyways, my point here is that I was around people who, if they could have found a fault in me, man, they could have corrected me, and they probably found some faults. They didn't feel the need to correct me all the time. And so I began to blossom there. I found my voice. I didn't hesitate as much. It was still nerve-wracking to get up in front of classes and speak and present my research findings, but I became someone who raised her hand a lot in class. I became someone who participated. I became someone who wanted to be heard for the first time in a long time. Another pivotal moment happened in between undergraduate and graduate school. My ex-husband, well, I'm using the word ex, so you could probably guess it. At some point, we got a divorce, and he did ask for one, which I'm thankful for. We weren't meant to be together. So there was a grief, there was a loss, there was an implosion in my world in between undergraduate and graduate school. But I'm so glad that happened because it sent me in this free fall of I don't have him anymore as a mirror, as an echo chamber to remind me of where I'm not perfect. And I'm at school where people aren't reminding me that I'm perfect because I wasn't, but people were reflecting back to me that my curiosity and my voice and my mind and my heart were beautiful. I didn't need to be perfect. I wanted to remember what I already knew, which was that I was a beautiful soul. And that was taken from me for 9 years of my marriage. It just was. And out of that divorce and into school, I began to find my courage to speak. However, what I noticed was that I still wasn't being able to integrate my voice back into my body. It was like a foreign voice, hearing my deep resonant voice that you're hearing right now. I used to speak much higher. I used to be higher pitch, and I used to speak faster. I speak slower now. I pause. I let my breath drop down into my body. It's like I brought back all of my yoga practices into the now. When I speak, it feels like a yogic practice. There's a slower pace to it, not always. When I get excited, I will speak faster. I just trust it. I go with it. Do I make mistakes in my grammar? Yeah, but that shows that I'm passionate. I'm more about getting the information across than I am about being perfect. And that's how I want to speak. That's who I am. And I don't correct other people in their grammar. So I want to speak to any of you right now who coming out of a marriage or coming out of a relationship of any kind, where you were meant to feel less than, and now it's hard to speak. I want to say to you, I see you. And that's a really painful, ugly place to be. But you won't be there forever. Now that you're out of that, I want you to feel hope and know, deeply know and trust that you will slowly, day by day, start to get your courage back and start to get that reflection back from the world that you are a beautiful soul because you really are. And the more you can put yourself out there, the more you can keep trying by speaking up to other people, saying hi to strangers in the grocery store. And that's what I started to do. I started to take more walks by the lake. I started to go to the local gym. I started to wave to people at grocery stores. I started to make connections. I started to hang out at the local coffee shop and ask people how they're doing. And when you get that positive reinforcement from people and they're like, you're such a nice person. Oh no, I'm so thank you for asking. And it's so great to see you again and connect with you. I couldn't believe how far I've annexed from my own voice to the point where it literally felt unsafe to speak. So if that's you, you're going to get through this. And there's going to be a point again. I don't know when, but it will happen where you love your voice and it's exciting for you to talk. And you can know that in your body, just by you loving yourself, your voice, and how you speak and how you show up, that you are liberating other people who also hate how they sound or want a different voice or wish that they could be more perfect when they spoke. Maybe they stutter. Maybe they have a lisp. You know, how you feel about yourself is going to come out in how you feel about your voice. We need to let go of perfectionism. And when you do, especially for your own voice, you're going to find that you talk more. And talking more is a really great thing. In the next episode that I record, I'm going to talk a little bit more about why speaking is so important and why it's creating a ripple of change in the world every single day, and how speaking up is actually going to change the vibration of the planet. Thanks so much for being here, guys. Thanks for listening to my vulnerable story. I hope it connected and resonated with you. If you're watching this video on YouTube, do me a favor and let me know in the chats. How was this for you to hear? Did this bring up anything for you? And where are you now speaking with your own voice? And if you're on the podcast listening, thanks for letting me be in your ears for a little bit. I love you guys, and I'll see you next episode.